Before we do that, though, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker for the day, current mayor and a awesome person, Hilary Bryant. I gotta say, in my limited time here in Santa Cruz, only about 6 years, been through about 3 mayors, Hilary Bryant is the first Santa Cruz politician who pretty much is universally liked. That's really, at least in my experience, even the people who normally just like dislike all of them, are just like, oh yeah, Hilary Bryant, she's good. So without further ado, the most universally liked politician that I've ever seen in Santa Cruz, Hilary Bryant.
Hands down the best introduction I've ever had. So not true. Let me just give you anybody a snapshot into my email for 5 minutes and you'll realize that there is nothing universally liked about this woman right in front of you.
Except for your hair.
My hair is not even universally liked. I can't go, I'll just tell that story before I say it. So in February of this year when we lost our officers, some of you may have heard, this is a true story. I was literally living at my office. I was there 15 hours a day, taking naps on my desk, calling my mom, asking her for a new jacket because I had another press conference to do. And in the course of this horrific week, I get a handwritten letter, Mayor Bryant, City Hall. I open it up, and it says, "Dear Mayor Bryant, your hair looks terrible. Do something about it." I thought, are you kidding me? Do you think I give... I'm not even going to say it because there's a lot of reporters in this room. But that is really not my primary concern at
Should
this
I know
moment.
who said
Oh, was it you? And meanwhile, I'm thinking, okay, so I haven't slept in days. I'm sure I look like a train wreck, but I'm trying. I'm putting on the suit. I'm there. I'm present, and my hair's falling out because I'm so stressed. And it was one of those moments where I thought, I bet Ryan Coonerty never got a letter like that. So that's the hair story. That's the hair story. I had, in thinking about what I was going to say today, I sort of put together some thoughts, and then yesterday happened. I came here rushing from event after event. I wasn't here on Friday because I was at the chamber. They were honoring our police department as an organization of the year, so I couldn't make it, and then I had to go over to Deanza neighborhood yesterday and talk with those neighbors about their concerns, and I rushed to get here. And I sat in the group about economic development, and Bonnie Lipscomb was facilitating, and Bonnie's wonderful, and she's so knowledgeable, and we had a good conversation, and then people went and got some food into themselves, and the conversation in that room, what happened was magical. It was incredible. And let me back up, because back to my hair story, my bad hair day. I started this year with so many hopes and dreams and being very excited about the year in front of us. The budget was looking like it was going to be better than it had been in years, and it's been my great honor to serve as mayor. It's hard for me to even believe actually that happened in my life, but I was just so full of excitement. And then a series of incidents that we all lived through started happening, and we lost Butch and Elizabeth in a horrific moment. And up to that point, I had written my speeches out, and I'd really put a lot of thought into having to give a speech. And the last speech I wrote this year was for Butch and Elizabeth's memorial service. And I had to speak at my own father's memorial service, but that memorial service was hands down the hardest moment in my entire life. Not just because, and you have to imagine that moment in time. We had a community that was devastated. I was speaking to a crowd at the HP Pavilion, and in front of me, I could not only see the grieving families and these children who had just lost their mother, which these babies without their mom, it just kills me. Think about that. But then you had the governor, you had the secretary, Panetta was there, Camilla Harris was there, and I could see all these faces. And I could think not only about all the people that were in that room, but all the people home in Santa Cruz who were grieving with us. And I've never felt the weight of responsibility of my position as much as I did in that moment. And that period of time has forever changed my life. And I wrote that speech because I really just wanted to do the best I possibly could for the families and for the community. And then I didn't write another speech. And since then, I've realized I've lived my life in this sort of, the glass is half empty as opposed to the glass is half full. It sort of took the passion out of the job for me. My son is the consummate, he's like the golden retriever. He's just happy, happy, happy all the time. And he said to me a couple of months ago, he said, Mom, you're just all so sad now. And it's not so much sad, it's just that there's just such a burden and there's such a responsibility and there's such worry in my daily life about this community because I care so much about it and I feel so responsible for it. And then I started getting into this countdown of how many meetings I had left. So in 23 days, I will no longer be your mayor. And my kids have calendars, and we mark on meetings and the days, and everyone's getting really excited. We're gonna get Mom back. And I've done the job to the best of my ability, but it's been a challenge. And then yesterday happened. And I am in this room, Anna and Mark, and Tom was there, and Chris popped his head in, and Carmen was there, and we were just having this discussion about economic development, and these ideas started flying, and Bud said something. He said, Santa Cruz is the vibrant adjacency to the Silicon Valley. I was like, yeah, we are. And then Mark started talking about a regional business concierge, and how could we sort of start thinking about the region and it gives me chills thinking about it. We were really just starting to envision the Santa Cruz that we wanted to have happen. We were talking about all the great things that happened here and how we could put it together. And that spark came back for me. And I said, this is why I ran for office. This is why I do this job. This is so exciting. This is what matters. And then I went home last night, and it's so not glamorous in my life. I'm like cooking dinner and kids and trying to throw laundry in. And my girlfriend who works for Cisco came by, and she was gonna come to Civinomicon, but then her husband was away for the weekend and she couldn't come. And I was telling her about this, and we started talking more about it. So there's 5 girls running around, it's complete chaos, the dog's in here, they're eating food off the counter. And I'm telling her what happened in this room. And we started talking about it more. And one of the things I think Bud said to me as I left, he said, really good way to get people from Silicon Valley to Santa Cruz to sort of talk about the magic that we have here and start thinking about this as not just an afterthought, but really as a vibrant tech community, would be to do a challenge where you said the mayor of Santa Cruz challenges the CEOs of Silicon Valley to come surf with her for 2 hours. I was like, that's kind of a good idea. That could be fun. I could get a lot of surfing in, and that might spark some interest. And so then we're talking more about it, and we just started brainstorming. I said to her, you didn't miss Civinomicon. You're kind of in Civinomicon. We're having our own Civinomicon in my kitchen, talking about this idea. And I think I tweeted like 3 times when I was running for office, but I have done nothing with Twitter since. So we got back on my Twitter account, we started talking, So if I started following you last night, that's why I started following you, because I was actually on Twitter thinking about this idea, and could we put it out, and would this go viral, and would anyone take notice, and maybe I should just start tweeting John Chambers right now and throwing down the gauntlet and getting these people over here. And that is the magic of what's happening in this room this weekend, is that those sparks are happening and people are talking about it, and it's taking civic engagement out of what happens at council chambers, which is a lot of public discourse and rhetoric and things that don't end up being very nice. And a lot of times, I always say our best decisions are the decisions we make when everybody leaves the room unhappy. But what happens in here is completely different. It's another conversation. And what my friend Lisa said to me last night was, she said, well, I don't have a lot of time, I can't run for office, but I just want to give back to my community. And I said, well, you're doing it right now. We're going to figure out this great idea of how to get CEOs over to surf with the mayor, and that's giving back to your community. And that is, at its core, what Civinomicon, and to me, is about. And I I haven't written, you know, I take notes all the time, but I have Post-it notes and things about what I'm gonna do and how I'm gonna take this moment and change my conversation for the next 23 days. For the first time last night, I said, oh my gosh, I only have 23 days, that's not enough time, how are we gonna do this? As opposed to, thank God I only have 23 more days and then I'll be done and I can go surfing and have my life back. And it really has changed the conversation for me in just that, I mean, what were we in that room for? It was hot and stuffy and we were in there for maybe an hour, but the passion and the group and the belief in Santa Cruz and just the conversations that were happening reminded me of why I ran for office, why I'm doing what I do. It's not about the mean letters about my hair or the bad emails that we get or about complaining about your parking ticket. It's about what Santa Cruz means and how we can all engage and make it even better than we all know it already is. And for that, I thank Robert, Manu, and all the people that put this together because it really has given me a great, great gift in just this opportunity to appreciate my role, appreciate my community again, and to remember that the glass is actually half full. So I welcome your questions. I don't know that I've spoken about what I was supposed to speak about. I have all my notes, but for me, that's what this weekend has been about, and I hope that each of you have found a moment of magic or excitement because we're having some great conversations here. So thank you. Is there anything?
Yeah, it said you were enamored with the idea of regional participation, and I know that up in the San Francisco area they have a Bay Area 1 in which actually they're losing sovereignty to a whole group, and when city council people that represent us dilute it like in AMBAG and other regional areas, we lose out our individual rights and have no control over taxes or local policy many times. But I see this as a push by organizations such as ICLEI and California Forward in their own papers under the guise of reform. They talk about how this is all going to be easier by getting rid of these jurisdictional lines, which again is not good for the people in my opinion.
Yeah, and let me speak to what was happening in the conversation in that room. It wasn't about regionalism from the perspective which you're speaking. It was more about the conversation arose because oftentimes, especially I think within the system of government, we get into our silos, and I know in the city of Santa Cruz, the city of Santa Cruz worries about the city of Santa Cruz, and the city of Watsonville worries about the city of Watsonville, and the county works about, everybody has what's supposed to be their jurisdiction, and we're not going to go outside of that. But oftentimes, every week we do business retention visits within the city, and we go out and talk to different businesses, and how are things going? Can we be of help? Or are there things that good, bad? We want to have a conversation about how it is to do business in the city of Santa Cruz. And part of that conversation recently, we've shifted to not just within the city, but for example, we went out to Fox Shocks, which is in Watsonville, and it wasn't to say to Fox Shocks, please come back to Santa Cruz. It was to say to Fox Shocks, we're really glad you're in Watsonville. We hope you're really happy there. Your business really matters to Santa Cruz Bikes and IBIS and all these other companies that are within the city of Santa Cruz, and we want to make sure that you stay within the region. And if there's any way we can be of help, we want to participate in that conversation. So it's more not about diluting what's here, but about saying that I think it's short-sighted to just look at the challenges or the great things about just the city of Santa Cruz. We're actually function much more as a region. So it was in that context that we were talking about regionalism and how companies like Fox Shocks benefit the entire Santa Cruz County, not just the city of Watsonville. Tom?
There was a day in Santa Cruz, Hilary, when it was seen as you either support business or support saving the environment. And I think that debate has kind of changed with the generations. And with the generation now you're looking for a good business climate and a good environment. Do you see that in our future?
Well,
Or can you talk about how you see the business climate here?
I really do, but you're talking to the woman who ran on that premise. When I ran for office, I remember people saying, you're not going to be elected because you're a real estate broker, and everyone in Santa Cruz hates real estate brokers, and you're a business person, and that's just not what we want to see on council. And my feeling at the time, and my belief now, and going forward, I think more and more people are having this conversation, is if your concern is the environment or social services or any of the other issues that you might think to focus on, unless you have a good tax base, you're not going to be able to take care and pay for those services or address those issues. So instead of breaking them apart, we have to think of them together. And that's really fundamentally, in my mind, the only way to get at a lot of the challenges that we currently face. And we have such a diverse business community here, and really for the most part, there's the businesses that are growing and thriving in Santa Cruz are the businesses that we're really excited to have represent Santa Cruz. I think for the most part, we look at businesses like what Richard Novak has done with NHS, and we think, Santa Cruz bikes and skateboards and Verve Coffee and the Glass Jar Penny Creamery and the things that are growing and thriving here are things that we all point to as examples of great businesses. So I think that it still certainly exists at moments in time, and I certainly am not saying God forbid somebody said let's bring a Walmart to Santa Cruz, because I would not even want to imagine that conversation at council. But yet we have a recognition that we have an 85% retail leakage outside. So people are shopping at stores that aren't here. They're taking their business outside of our city. And how can we start bringing that back and capturing it in a way that fits within our community? But I think that conversation has really dramatically changed over the past probably 10, 15 years. Rachel?
I'm really interested in this process because a couple of people, you and Zach, have said, that your input, this is a question about, community involvement and ideas coming out of new sectors of the community that don't usually engage in the political process. And I like the goals of Civinomicon because I think it kind of moves us in that direction. I heard, Zach getting 80 angry emails about potholes and how he couldn't think about the big picture. Probably would have loved to be in that room as well. So I hear from politicians that the public comment period has really soured and become kind of contentious and isn't the best place, and emails isn't the best place. So I wonder about how something just online would feed that kind of need you guys have for real, thoughtful, new ideas that think outside of the usual channels. I had this conversation this morning with my partner and said, well, isn't that why commissions exist? They're advising the council, they're advising people, and they're the experts, so they delve way down into these things. Whereas our group yesterday, we were struggling with something as big as solving our water crisis, and we knew all of this had all been thought of and studied so deeply before. But then Karina Pushnik said, oh, someone said fiber optic might pay for part of the rail trail, and we hadn't really thought of that before. And I thought, well, that's why we have some of these new ideas popping up with people that don't go to those council meetings. So my question is, where do you see some new opportunities for input of different groups of people in different environments other than council or email that this model might feed in a more meaningful way?
That's a great question. I sort of feel like I came full circle here today because one of the first things I did when I was on council was I got assigned to a tech task force that met right here, and Chris and Peggy were so helpful in that conversation. And out of that tech task force really came our Code for America project and Open Counter. And it was we would sit in this room and it was people that really didn't typically engage in they were never at council meetings. They weren't, when on council, you sort of the same people in chambers, the same people at the meetings. There's often not a lot of new voices in the room, and even the emails at some point you start recognizing names. And out of that came such an exciting moment because it was new voices, new ideas, new thoughts on the same concerns that we'd had forever. And I see this as being another iteration of that. And to be honest, I don't know what will happen with the water group that we're going to end up putting together, but part of the thought behind that is to get new input on the challenges that we face. We've certainly done that with the Public Safety Task Force too. You know, this is bigger than what council can solve. We want input from a broader community. How do we sort of bring that to our community? At the beginning of this year, even when we were just struggling with how to work with all the public safety challenges we were having throughout the city, we started bringing city services to neighborhood parks and having meetings there, and sort of how can we bring city government to you. And I remember at Grant Street Park, a man came to me and he said, you know, I get on the Apple bus every day, I've never gone to a council meeting, I've never engaged with my government ever, ever, ever. This is the first time. Thank you for coming to me, because my life doesn't allow, by the time I get the kids off school, get on the bus, go to work, come home, I just can't engage. And he had it's just different ways of having the conversation. And I really think that it is our job as politicians to listen. We spend so much time talking, but it's really our job to listen. And I have office hours at the MA and at the Natural History Museum just because I want to be out in the community. Don't come to me, let me come to you, because I want to hear your concerns. I want to see if I can address them. Even just at that meeting I was at Dianza yesterday, they were having this 20-minute conversation about recycling and the challenges of that. And I said, let me just bring Public Works to you. That's how I see changes in government. Online is hard for me, and I have to say I have had some of the most abusive, awful things said to me in my entire life through email, because I think people can sit down at their computer, type it off, and hit send, and not think of how, Zach mentioned this yesterday, how it feels when you open that email and read it. And we read every single email that comes to us. But having conversations with people, even sometimes I'll get those really angry emails, I'll pick up the phone, I'll call them and I say, would you like to meet? Would you like to talk? Because that changes the public discourse. And honestly, giving people 3 minutes at a microphone at a council meeting does not, you know, people always say 3 minutes is not enough, and it's like, yeah, it's not. Is 10? No, probably not, to talk about the gravity of this issue. It's just not enough time. It's not a really good way to have a conversation about any serious issue. So we have to start thinking about different ways to do it, and that's why I'm so appreciative of this process. This is going to engage a different set of voices in the conversation. And hopefully in a really positive way, because we've got to start doing it differently. It just doesn't, the system works for the people it works for, but it doesn't work for, I think, having a broader community conversation. And that's what was so exciting about this. That's what was so exciting about this. Jim?
We'd like to thank you for impaneling the Public Safety Task Force. By doing that, you open up the city transparency to all the departments. I was able to sit on the task force and work with it. But you also open up the rest of the county to transparency, because we were able to hear from all of those other agencies. So it takes one person in your position to do that, because we heard from every representative in the county that provides any kind of service for public safety. Thank you.
Thank you. And you know that Jim's a great example of when we ask these things of our community, we are not asking small things. I know you guys have all been here all weekend. But these task force, the public safety task forces, they're week after week after week for 6 months. It is not a small service that we're asking, and I cannot imagine that the water task force is going to be any smaller than what we're asking the public safety task force to tackle. But it's so important. And it's also a way of saying, you don't have to run for office. You don't have to take the abuse that I take day in and day out, but you have to engage. This is your community. Please contribute how you can, and it doesn't have to be in that way. Just participate, participate. I tell this to my kids all the time. It's like, you know, every time you see a police officer, every time you see a firefighter, just say thank you. That's all you have to do. It doesn't have to be a big thing. Just say thanks. Just engage in the process. Just remember how important your vote is. Even if you don't get online and do it in this way, don't forget to vote. Don't forget to pay attention to who you're voting for. It's just, I think we lose track of the importance of this whole process. It kind of, the whole reason I ended up running for office, aside from I really got frustrated about certain things, was I cannot tell you how moved I was when Barack Obama, God elected into office for the first time. And that moment of just, here, this is what our government is all about. Here is a African American for the first time taking the head of the most powerful country in the world. It's because we all have an opportunity to participate in this. That is what is so incredible about government to me. And that is really what I'd lost sight of this year, because I had gotten caught in all the bad emails, the crisis, the concerns. I'd forgotten about the magic of government, and this is part of the magic of government. John.
Hilary, could you comment on the renaissance that's happening on the west side of Santa Cruz, what it means for the economy, and the fact that there's businesses there that are being able to thrive, and they haven't had to deal with the downtown problems or transportation and parking and social issues and difficult development. And just say what you think that means for Santa Cruz and your view on the whole situation out there.
It certainly is it is having, as you say, a renaissance. The west end of town, or whatever people are calling it, is a very special thing that's happened very organically. And certainly I would never, the city can take no credit for that. It has really been a result of some amazing business owners who just said, this is what we have a vision that's really outside of the box. I mean, if you think about Kelly and Mark going in and taking what was just a dilapidated cannery building and saying that they were going to create Kelly's Bakery and all the things that came out of that, it's really hard to, I mean, I don't have that kind of vision. I can appreciate, I'm not the idea person, by the way. I know you all know that. I'm not the idea person, but I know how to execute ideas. I just don't put a lot of them. But we all have our roles to play. That was incredible that they did that. And then all these other people, my kids are in love with Sawyer. Have you guys been to Sawyer? That is such a cool shop. Stacy, who owns Sawyer's, I met her out surfing at Man Racing. She's like, yeah, come to my shop. And the West End Tap, and now we've got Bantam, which is fantastic, and there's just this collection of business owners, and it really has revitalized that area, and so just a new way of thinking about what is never going to come back to Santa Cruz, in my opinion, and I think that we can all collectively agree that we're not going to get the Wrigley and the Liptons and these large manufacturing. What we're going to get is more like the new thing that's happening at the Wrigley building, a lot of small businesses breaking up a big space and collaborating and getting a synergy out of being close to each other and interacting. So I think that is probably the future of Santa Cruz. That's certainly part of what we were talking about yesterday, is these diversified small businesses and how they create their own working microcosms that really feed off of each other. So I think it's a special place.
Just a quick follow-up question to that. So you would support the repurposing of those industrial, vacant industrial properties to help revitalize Santa Cruz's economy, and because it's kind of an outdated reservation of space and zoning, right?
We have done some of that. There is some need to save some of that. Certainly the bike companies have used more space than other, but in general, I think the city is really trying to work towards that. But it's a new way of thinking about how to use space, and it just, there's one thing I've learned. I used to say government should run more like a business, and it's just not. That's just not how it's going to happen. Government has its role, business has its role, and often part of the discussion yesterday was government. I don't think we should be leading on the business ideas. I think we should be saying, how can we help? How can we facilitate? How can we collaborate? One of the things was, how can we celebrate? Those are the roles that we should play. But by the time we're trying to lead, business is 10 years ahead of us. So it really should be for the businesses to decide what works for their business model, and for us to play a supportive role in that, in my opinion. Other people are, I'm 1 vote of 7, so 1 vote of 7.
We have one more.
Yeah, You mentioned that we have the best budget we've had in a while. Things are almost under control. But Santa Cruz certainly took a major hit in the current economic downturn starting in 2008. And we're living in the context of a situation where we now have a current stock market rally, but it's supported by the Federal Reserve doing the biggest, the quantitative easing programs have been the biggest extension of credit in the world history. And that's all on the back of the American taxpayer. And that's what's sustaining it. And meanwhile, we have tremendous uncertainty in all of the markets. We have a quadrillion, in excess of a quadrillion of derivatives out there, all of which are impinging on all of the interest rates and things like that. JP Morgan lost in excess of $6 billion just for making an error in their trading. And many economic experts are talking about the possibility of a severe economic disaster looming on perhaps the near future. Is the city planning for a possible disastrous economic situation?
I think if there's one thing that the city learned from how many budget cuts did we do? 13, 14 series of significant budget cuts, was that we need to really recognize that that can happen at any point, and we have to be as diverse as possible. We have to have reserves, and we have to really be careful with our spending. And there is certainly not, although I say the budget forecast is great, there's not a sense of everything's fabulous, let's go out and spend. That really has not been the way council has acted. Our city manager, Martine Bernal, is an incredibly good city manager and really is able to look at long-range situations, potentials, possibilities. And council, although we've tried to put stuff back in the budget, and we've had things that have been additional expenses this year that wouldn't have been in years past, we've really tried to recognize that we're not out of this yet. I mean, the housing market is turning around, but the businesses are doing better, but we still need to be cautious because we don't want to go back into the situation that we were in just in 2008, 2009. So I think that from the perspective of at least the city, we were ahead of the curve in terms of getting out of the recession, but that's because we had made a lot of really tough choices before a lot of the surrounding municipalities did. So I think next year's forecast will be better, but there's always the eye on you have to make sure that you are ready for if something else happens. And certainly this year, if nothing else, if we had been in that series of budget cuts and had the crisis that we had, the amount of money we've had to spend additionally on public safety this year is just, had that happened in 2008, I don't know what we would have done. So having had put money aside, had reserves, allowed us to respond more quickly than we might have been able to otherwise. So thank you. Sorry, that one.